cries out for the vengeance of my people's blood, which can only be repaid with at least twice as much blood, or maybe 3 times as much blood, like if you went to hell and it was full of blood, and that blood was on fire, and it was raining blood, and maybe that would be enough blood, but probably not.
Charge! For Sigma! Confront! And the Silver Hammer! Ah! A glorious night! I cannot see! No, wait, I think the eye patch over the wrong eye.
What's up, ladies and gentlemen, and welcome to this guide themed with a pirate's life. Here to mastering melon mechanics, I'll be your captain, the party knife.
That's got to be the best pirate I've ever seen. So it would seem.
God damn you, Disney, why do you have copyright on the only piece of music in the entire world that just universally says pirate? It's not fair. Why is the rum always gone? Anyways, I put a lot of work into this video, so if you guys enjoy the treasure trove of Vermintide knowledge that is my YouTube channel, consider sharing some of your loot back by hitting that subscribe button or even ringing the bell, and that way I can do your treasure hunting for you while you just sit back, relax, and enjoy.
None shall halt my judgment! Holy Sigma! Bless this ravaged body!
But anyways, I think that was just about enough screwing around and enough pirate references to fill my needs for at least 10 videos. So you better grab a bottle of rum, guys, as we dive into Sigmar's sea of super salty secrets. And just like last time, we're gonna start off simple and slowly move our way up the ladder of complexity, going through each of Saltzpyre's weapons one by one and showing off their optimal attack sequence versus specific enemy spawns. Up first, the one hell of a salty axe, also known as axe and not Falchion, because the Falcon is exactly what you're going to be missing once you start trying to deal with trash minions, since every single attack it has can really only hit one minion, and there's really nothing you can do other than try to mix in a push here and there to provide some much needed extra crowd control as you just spam your light attack sequence while dodging. Up next we have the unarmored elites and specials, where you're simply going to be light attacking as well, as they provide a higher amount of basic infantry damage, even per hit, and thus they are always going to be your optimal choice. Now moving on, we have our armored elites as well as our armored specials. Now for the one-handed axe, you have no other choice but to simply spam your heavy attack sequence, which has a repeating sequence of high armor damage and easy headshots, potentially mixing in a light attack here and there just to try and trigger your Swiss slaying. And well, that's pretty much it. Long story short, if it has armor, you heavy attack. If it doesn't, you light attack. Next, we have the recently divorced wife of the previously mentioned axe, Falchion, which, despite not being a top tier weapon, is still definitely better than the one-handed axe. At least it is if we make the fairly reasonable assumption that we're gonna encounter more than just one specific enemy type, and that enemy type having to be armored. Now, whenever you're fighting trash minions with the Falchion, you basically have two options. You can either just spam your light attacks, which is gonna be fine most of the time, assuming you also throw a dodge in here and there, or you can use your 2 first light attacks and then do either a block cancel or a push cancel in order to repeat the sequence. Now, this isn't strictly necessary, but that's what I would default to if I was one attack away from dying and had to fight an entire horde. Now, in terms of the unarmored elites, it's still gonna be your light attack sequence that's optimal, but just as it is with a lot of other weapons, you can still get some extra value by using a heavy attack to initiate, allowing better timing and a potential headshot, and simply follow up that sequence with consecutive light attacks. Moving on to the armored minions. Here we're going to initiate with a heavy attack and then follow that up with 2 light attacks and then repeat that sequence in order to gain a shortcut to the 3rd light attack, which in fact deals double the amount of damage to armored minions that a heavy attack does, and with the added bonus of also being an overhead attack, you're going to have a pretty easy time getting headshots, and this is by far the most valuable sequence to be aware of, especially now that you're rolling solo without your axe. You're going to need that extra armor damage. The Great Sword. For those of you who've seen my Kruber Mastery Guide trailer, this was Frostmourne, but we're gonna rename it the Sword of Solidified Salt. Only to magically transform into Kruber for 30 seconds in order to show you the armory that I was dumb enough to forget opening when I was recording, and instead of wasting an entire hour setting up the scene again, I just went and decided that was probably gonna be fine. Now, whenever you're dealing with high densities of infantry minions, you should be fairly well covered with the 2-handed sword, as you can use both your light attack sequence and your heavy attack sequence to great effect. And although we're talking about tiny optimizations, you're usually going to initiate with your heavy attack sequence and then progress into your light attacks as you deem it necessary. But enough about that, let's move on to the unarmored elites, where we have a little bit of a special case with the two-handed sword here, because optimally here you really just want to repeat your push block attacks as many times over as you possibly can, hoping to get headshots all the way, as this is the single only overhead attack you have on the two-handed sword. So when you inevitably run out of stamina, you're just gonna follow that up with carefully and well-timed heavy attacks. And then right back to wasteful consumption of resources, which is totally fine in this case, because you know, it's what's called a sustainable resource. Now, as the son of Sigmar, you're probably gonna be a pimp. And what do pimps do? Well, they smack hoes, of course. Okay, I should probably stop going off script. Like slapping someone in the face seemed like a good comparison, equivalent to the low armor damage, and thus you just keep smacking with those heavy attacks, until I realized that morphed into a joke about how to keep hitting your hoes even after they start wearing helmets. What the fuck is wrong with me? Guess we'll never find out. Moving on. Axe and Falchion. Wait, what? Now, as some of you will undoubtedly recall, this weapon used to be so fucking broken that it was legitimately the only weapon that anyone on any class with any build across all difficulties would ever use, and was thus nerfed fairly hard, and rightfully so. But, with the one noticeable exception of very high level weaves and other equally suicidal endeavors, but everywhere else, this weapon is gonna be absolutely amazing, and more than that, it's gonna be fun to use and extremely easy to understand, because it has a weapon sequence structure such that almost no matter what you're attacking and no matter what you're clicking, you can't fuck it up entirely. With that said, you're not here because you want to be mediocre, so the first thing you're gonna do is use your push block attack, and you're gonna keep doing that until you proc Swift Slaying. Once you've procced it, simply follow up the push block attack with 2 light attacks and repeat the sequence. Push block, light light, push block, light light. Now, for the unarmored elites, at least against berserkers, you're always going to be initiating with a heavy attack in order to get one of those double headshots, because it's a dual wield weapon, basically quadrupling the listed number in the armory. Your highest infantry damage dealing attack sequence is theoretically still just your light attack sequence, but that's not always a useful metric to measure, because like how often can you just stand and light attack a berserker coming at you? And the answer to that question is approximately once. I mean, I guess theoretically speaking you do it as many times as you can get resurrected throughout a game, but I'm assuming after 3 deaths you're not gonna try a 4th just because it had the highest damage output. In which case you can always revert to the armor attack sequence, which is 2 heavy attacks followed by a light attack, which I absolutely hate, because every single time that's the case, I have to then move from the unarmored elites and say now it's time for the armored elites. And you guys are never gonna guess which sequence you have to use for those, because it's definitely not gonna be the one I just referred to as the armor sequence. Okay it is, but it's okay, because it's only one of your 3 available options, not including the fact that you want to throw in a push block attack here and there to proc your Swift Lane. Now of course the first and most obvious option is simply to cycle your heavy attacks. The second and slightly more sophisticated method is to follow up the 2 heavy attacks with a single light attack, which brings me to the third and much more surprising option, which, although it sounds super obvious now that I'm saying it, is a heavy attack followed by 2 light attacks, giving you a total of 3 different, nearly identical attack sequences you can use. And do keep in mind that the push block attack, on top of the 25% crit chance, has the same unlisted property of being able to hit multiple armored minions that I referenced when talking about the dual swords. And just to be clear, this does not necessarily mean that the attack ever will cleave to armored minions. It just means that theoretically speaking, it is not directly prevented from doing so. The Furious Flail. Why is it furious? Well, you know, the other Flail has fire, and that's kinda its thing. And you know, he also wanted a thing, but he didn't have a thing, so I was like, okay, I'm just gonna give him a thing or something. Wait, where was I? Oh yeah, Furious Flail. Now, there are a couple of key features to notice here, the first of which is the difference in cleave and damage output, both regular and armored, on the 2 first and 2 last attacks in the sequence, and a heavy attack sequence with absolutely massive cleave and stagger properties, along with the tank mass modifier on top, which we'll get to later in the guide. And although for reasons I cannot fathom this isn't listed in the armory, but the Flail has a total of 2 epic dance moves. It's shocking, I know. It's like almost double of any other weapon I know. And while you do the math on that, I'm just gonna continue with my video. Now, in terms of fighting trash minions, you do have a couple of options, the most obvious and easily executable of which is a simple double light attack sequence fused together with a block cancel to reset, at which point you repeat. However, this will not always be sufficient when fighting hordes with an extremely high minion density, and for these scenarios you need to mix in a push block attack to stagger the horde. And the tricky part here is to always do a block cancel after the push block attack before starting your light attack sequence again, for a final sequence of light attack, push block attack, cancel, and repeat. Last but not least, if you're fighting a dense mixture of both trash and armored minions, you might as well charge up the rotor blades for that heavy helicopter attack, since this attack, although low in damage, will stagger nearly everything you hit, making it a much safer approach if you want to avoid getting hit by trash all the time. Now, in terms of fighting unarmored elites, you're basically going to be using your light attack sequence for damage, with a big emphasis on the 3rd and 4th attack in the sequence, as you're heavily reliant on those 2 attacks, specifically if you want to deal effective damage. However, one approach that I feel like people vastly undervalue in the Flail is the insane crowd control that the heavy attacks can provide, as they can potentially stagger charging berserkers and multiple elites at the same time, providing you with a window of opportunity in which you can finish them off with your light attacks. Now, another great thing about the Flail is the amount you're going to be laughing when someone pulls a Storm Vermin patrol. Now, the sequence you're going to be using is push block attack, double light attack, and repeat, which on top of dealing insane armor damage and being really easy to execute, has the delightful property of not giving 2 fucks about shielded minions. And this is true for both the heavy 1 and 2, as well as light attack 3 and 4. Now, that is your optimal DPS sequence, but it can be supplemented for a regular light attack sequence whenever you're low on stamina. And last but not least, especially on the Zealot, do not undervalue the value of the heavy attack's ability to continuously stagger multiple elites while simultaneously allowing you to move backwards. And if you're not going to bother utilizing the heavy attacks, you might as well open your inventory right now and equip the Axe and Falchion instead. The rat-wrecking, rape-reaving Rapier of Ragnaros? Like, goddamn! Good luck saying that 5 times fast in a row. Thankfully, its attack sequences are quite a lot easier to understand, as it has identical light attacks and only a single heavy attack with 2 variations in damage output depending on the weapon's wind-up time, which even so still makes the weapon scene fairly simple compared to some of the other examples. And that's exactly how we're gonna start off, because whenever you're fighting a horde or really just more than 2 trash minions at a time, you really only have 1 sequence, 1.5 if we're generous. And it consists of nothing but light attacks and a push block attack here and there, which is identical to the light attack in terms of both its damage and stagger modifiers. There's in other words nothing to do here. I mean, unless you want to prick them to death one by one, which I'll admit would be impressive. Now, when fighting unarmored elites, your best bet other than just doing a fully charged heavy attack to the face is to use the quicker and thus safer, not fully charged or heavy light attack if you will, in combination with the Rapier's pistol shot, the activation key for which in the keybinding settings is listed as weapon special. Now, at first glance, this shot might seem both trivial and underwhelming, but this can very likely be attributed to the decrease in damage output in relation to distance when compared to an actual ranged weapon. In other words, it's a come at me bro, not a sniper, with the damage output that is primarily relevant in very close quarters. It does however have 3 other amazing utility functions. Precisely because it is a melee weapon shot, it can activate swift slaying at a distance, prior to even engaging the fight, and when paired with the Witch Hunter Captain's passive ability, can still execute minions with a critical headshot regardless of its damage output, which is why it's definitely worth it to throw in a shot here and there in between your fully charged heavy attacks that you're gonna use for fighting armored minions. Last but not least, when you least expect it, this shot will save you from an assassin pouch, since it can be done without switching weapon and without ammunition. And to finish it all off, it has great block cost modifiers, amazing mobility, and a 50% stamina cost associated with pushing. The fishing bruh. Wait, what? Bill. The Billhook, of course. You know what? I'm gonna name you Billy. Now, the thing about Billy is he's not like the other kids. He doesn't have any friends, and the first time you meet him, he's gonna be extremely awkward and you're not really sure how to make sense of it all. But really, you just gotta spend some time with him and get to know him first. And that way, when he grows up to be a super psychotic, mass-murdering means of impalement, you'll be friends. He might even help you grab some pussy. I'm just kidding. On a serious note, the Billhook is absolutely amazing, and is probably the single only weapon currently in the game that is comparable to, or perhaps even contesting with, the Sword and Dagger. And I'm talking in relation to both skill cap, viability, and input complexity. Now, the initial awkwardness I was referring to in my Billy metaphor arises from the initial struggle of fighting dense hordes for longer periods of time. Now, the most effective but also highly expensive way of dealing with hordes is a super simple sequence of push block attack into light 1, push block attack into light 1, which is super easy to execute, but it's going to be draining your stamina really quickly and is thus not viable for longer periods of time. But thankfully you can get around this problem by simply stringing another 2 light attacks on the sequence, so you end up with a push block attack into a triple light attack, ending up with a total of 4 attacks in the sequence, 3 of which are cleave attacks, which is more than enough to deal with any number of infantry minions. And a way to really take your game to the next level is to learn how to cycle your stamina and use it as a resource, always initiating with the expensive sequence but always transitioning to the cost-effective one before you hit 0. But whenever things do go sideways, as they inevitably will, it's crucial that you use your weapon special into a light attack and simply repeating that sequence over and over. Now, moving on to the unarmored elites, we're gonna start off with my absolute favorite sequence on this weapon, which works on any spear across all classes, is light attack cancel, 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 light attack. I'm not entirely sure why, but it has a really weird artificial feel to it, almost as if you're not supposed to be doing it, but for a brief moment you become something more, something greater. The player ceases to exist and you become a stabbing mechanism. However, a berserker would put a stop to that pretty darn quickly, and for those you're gonna use the same sequence that we're gonna demonstrate here versus armored minions. Now, you essentially have three options, but by far the most crucial is a cycle between your weapon special and your heavy attack. Now, in principle, you could increase your damage output simply by cycling through your heavy attacks or using a cycle of heavy 1 and block cancel. But in practice, this is almost never gonna be the case. Sure, there's gonna be time to cycle in an extra heavy attack here and there, but as I'll demonstrate shortly, the true power of this weapon comes from its guaranteed stagger that, on top of just staggering the minion for your next attack, can be selectively used to target specific minions that are about to attack you, allowing you to control huge amounts of armored minions while still dishing out damage. Ah, isn't it beautiful, you guys? So peaceful, such a pretty moon. It's the perfect place for the bonus section. Bonus section, woo! I thought we'd start off with a quick demonstration just to showcase what I was referring to when talking about selectively staggering specific elites in order to control the fight whenever you're dealing with multiple armored minions. Now, when there's only one of them, it gives you the luxury of not having to bother dodging, but the true value doesn't reveal itself until you have a scenario where multiple armored minions are trying to attack you, often in a sequence one by one, making it extremely difficult to dish out damage with other weapons, or even stay alive for that matter. But this is where the billhook shines, because the animation time of a Chaos Warrior recovering from a stagger is longer than the time it takes for you to both stagger and attack a subsequent other Chaos Warrior, meaning even when you're forced to abort your attack in order to stagger a Chaos Warrior that's about to hit you, you're essentially building up windows of opportunity throughout the fight. And if you combine it with the Witch Hunter Captain's ulti, you can do this. Wait, this is taking too long. Ah, great idea. There's nothing like a good rampage to get you in the mood for a good rampage. God, I love rampages. Smash like button if you like rampages, and if you don't, you will.
Taste Sigmar's wrath!
Which actually has a really nice flavor to it. I mean, you wouldn't think that Sigmar, being a god and all, would cook himself, right? But I gotta say, his wrath was extremely good, and set at a super reasonable price of 400 shillings. Now, one last thing I want to demonstrate before moving on to some actual gameplay is the weapon special attack's ability to simply catch assassins mid-air, and it's significantly easier to time with the weapon special than it would have been with an equivalent light attack or push, and I'm talking easier than it would have been with any other light attack slash push in the game. Now, the Rapier has a similar feature from its weapon special shot as well, but in my opinion the grab attack is superior even here, as it's not only easier to actually grab the assassin, but once you do, you have him under your control, he's in range, and you can actually kill the assassin, whereas with the gunshot, which is easier to miss, even if you do hit it, if you don't hit it at the proper range, he's just gonna despawn and jump you again. Now, what I've done here is I've located a hook rat in its natural habitat, and we're about to get revenge, motherfucker. See, there's just something beautiful and delicious about being able to hook a hook rat. And since I've entirely disabled my own damage, you can just stand here and dance with him as long as you want to. And I'm not gonna tell you what it looks like I'm doing, but just listen to the sounds it's making. I think he's had enough now, we'll let him go. Ha! As if. Did you taste that? Oh, it's that sweet, sweet taste of revenge. No, but for real though, we've been covering quite a few things in this video today, even though it's totally not day at all, and in fact 6:30 in the morning and I fucking want to sleep. But despite that, I managed to find a suitable clip which demonstrated most of the attack sequences of the billhook in a solo scenario, which I seem to recall it was Legend, Vanguard, and something else I forgot. Which is why for the next minute and a half, I'm gonna shut up. I know, right? It's like, what?
Watch out! Chaos Warrior! God's side has claimed the Chaos Warrior! That assassin will trouble us no longer! The sorcerer! Over there! 'Tis his doing! A blight stormer! The air thickens with dust! A chaos warrior! Its armor shall not hold! Armor is no defense against the righteous! That sorcerer will summon no more winds! We have slain the blight stormer! Succulent vitality! We appear to have drawn attention. A pity. Hop track! Stand clear of that hook! Left leg guard! The righteous feel no pain! There's a backstabber scouting nearby!
Now, this video was an absolute behemoth to make, and somehow I managed to fuck myself over every single time by making the next video more complicated than the previous. But anyways, that's all I had for you guys this time. Thank you guys so much for watching. If you enjoyed, please don't forget to dislike, unsubscribe, and uncomment. I mean, shut up, and then unshut up, and then comment, because I fucking need those comments. I love you guys. Stay awesome. Peace out.
Other way in! Oh look, the tavern's on fire. The tavern's on fire!